Hello there, me again. This is probably going to be a little bit of a longer video than I often do, but it is an important one to me, so here we go. Excuse me if I look away, because I want to get this one right. Right, well, this past Tuesday, I'm recording this on Wednesday, so yesterday then, I came to the end of a very long road, one that I've been on all my life. For many years, since my childhood, I've suspected that there was something different about me, and I didn't know what it was, nor really how to explain how I felt. But yesterday, I found out that there was something fundamentally different about me, and that is, I have Asperger's. I am on the autistic spectrum. Now, this video isn't meant to educate anybody. I haven't got the knowledge for that. It's simply meant as a brief rundown of how I was diagnosed and what that process was, and also my opinions regarding the diagnosis and the language surrounding the subject a little bit. Right, well, I live in Wales, which is in the UK, Britain. So I'm British, basically. And over here, certainly in Wales, we have something called IAS, which is the Integrated Autism Service. And what this does is it handles the diagnostic process of people who, or for people then, that think that they might be autistic. They go through a process to see whether they are or not. And IAS is the body that runs that process, if you like, made up of clinical professionals, there are counsellors and a psychiatrist on board as well. Most of which work for the NHS in some capacity, from what I can gather. A few of whom have published articles on various subjects. So basically, how did it start? Right, well, it was 2 appointments. First appointment was with a counsellor. It's known as a pre-diagnostic counselling appointment, if you like. So I saw a counsellor who's trained in the diagnosing of ASD, autistic spectrum disorders, and explained to her a lot of my life. She took notes as I explained it, and those notes were then passed to the people, or the lady that was doing the assessment proper, and that took place on this Tuesday. The actual assessment interview was this Tuesday. The way it's done here is, if the first person you see, i.e. the counsellor, and the person who performs the assessment reach the same conclusions about the person that they're diagnosing, then that's the diagnosis. They diagnose that person with autism at that point. If, I'm guessing, they both have to tally. So if one of them thought that the person was autistic and the other one didn't, then there wouldn't be a diagnosis of autism. Or if both of them thought that there was no diagnosis of autism, then there would be none, if you get what I'm saying. So that is how one arrives at a diagnosis here. There is a diagnostic criteria that is used, which is known as DISCO. DISCO. It's an acronym standing for Diagnostic Interview for Social and Communication Disorders. The O at the end of DISCO comes from disorder, rather than calling it DISC-D, which just sounds like IT terminology, at least to me. The diagnostic interview itself took roughly 3 hours. This was the one that I had on Tuesday. Now, because I still live at home with my mum, there were 3 of us in the room. There was me, my mum, and the lady doing the assessment. Now, that was important because a lot of the questions were actually for my mum regarding my development as a child, which in cases of autism is very important, of course, but also how those developmental differences may or may not be, in some cases, manifesting in adulthood. So her observations were very relevant, and that's why she was there to answer those questions. Now, at the end of that 3-hour period, they tell you whether you have autism or not, of some form. And in my case, got to the end and the pronouncement was made that indeed I have autism. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming in the post about it, and in about 2 months I've got to go to, I'm not sure whether it's mandatory or not actually, but there will be a post-diagnostic counselling session, which basically they tell you what your diagnosis means in terms of your life and make you aware of any help that's available, and they determine with the person whether they need help. People come across this word autism, or they come across the word Asperger's, or they come across the idea of spectrum disorders or autistic spectrum disorders. And I think in the broadest sense, most people have one of 3 reactions to hearing that word in the context of I have this, or it's talking about it. I think basically people can be positive, neutral, or negative. Now, this is only in my experience, but for people that are positive about it, that's fine. You know, in my experience, they're usually people that either have it themselves, know somebody who have had it, or know something about it. Then you get the other side of the coin, which are people who are negative about it, which can be more problematic. They usually don't know what it is, or or enough about what it is, and it may be worth such people learning a little bit about stuff like that so that they don't go around needlessly offending people, at least in my opinion. And then you come to the neutrals, which is, I think, most people, in a sense, because, you know, if you go to a shop and buy something, or if you go to the doctor, or if you do anything, really, or many things at least, that involve another person, who gives a monkeys whether they've got autism or not? It doesn't come up. It doesn't need to. So, we don't think about it, really. As for what autism means for me, and for anybody else diagnosed with it, it means that I am not neurotypical. That means that my brain structure is slightly different to other people's. For what reason, I may never know. It could be hereditary, it could be because I was born by C-section and there was a period of time where I didn't have perhaps enough oxygen. It could be a number of things. The why isn't really relevant. Now, people call autism a condition or disorder, and I have done myself, probably during the course of this video. It's hard to avoid. But I do take a certain amount of issue with calling it a condition or a disorder in the strictest sense, in the context of mental or physical health. It's not depression. It's nothing like depression or anxiety or schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, where somebody is what we term to be mentally ill, we as society. Although anxiety can and depression can accompany autistic disorder, autistic conditions. Again, it's hard to avoid using that word, and I have them both. I have both depression and anxiety. However, when you actually look at what autism is, it's a difference in brain structure. It's not something wrong with the brain. It's not something misfiring. It's not the production or underproduction or overproduction of a certain neurotransmitter or other neural chemical. It's a different structure of the brain. Thus, it is a neurological difference, a structural difference. So, to use a very basic analogy, would you say that the difference between a man and a woman or a non-binary person was a disorder? No, it's a difference. And as a friend of mine so eloquently put it, it's perfectly possible to have a completely healthy autistic brain. At the end of the day, it's our differences that make us human. You know, it's not a bad thing, being different. It's what makes us who we are. Contrary to what people will tell you, it's not terrible to be different. We all are. It's what makes us the same, is that we're as different from each other as each other. Now, slightly controversial, but one example of how differences are handled, because it's not differences that cause the problems, it's how people handle them. And one such way is through the use of language. Now, language is very powerful and very emotive and evocative. And if I say anything here that offends anybody, that is absolutely not my intention. A word used to describe people with autism, Asperger's in particular, that I've heard, is the word Aspie. Now, Aspie. This word has a lot of connotations to it. Not all of them positive, but not all of them negative either. But it's a word that many people with autism or Asperger's, or people who aren't on the spectrum, find offensive. I completely respect that. For me, however, the word is merely a short form of Asperger's. Do I deny that it has an emotional connotation in the minds of others? Absolutely not. But for me, it's what the word means. It's just a shorthand. In fact, the woman that diagnosed me used, among other words, the word Aspie. And also there's a clinical psychologist called Professor Tony Atwood, who I believe is American, who, when diagnosing people with Asperger's, says, "Congratulations, you're an Aspie," which I think is great, because it takes a word that people are going to hear in both negative and positive ways, and it gives them an introduction to it, which is positive. At the end of the day, as I say, I do not define the word negatively. Some do. You might. If you do, that's fine. We have to define words for ourselves. Our definitions can change, but the individual, part of being an individual is that we define what words mean to us. And that definition is often the most important. There's another objection that people use against the word Aspie. They say, "Oh, you're calling yourself an Aspie, that means that you're defining yourself as a condition or by your condition." Okay, that's fair enough. Let's change the language slightly then. Instead of using the word condition, how about we use the word difference? So people would be saying, you define yourself by a difference. You're defining yourself with regards to a difference that you have between you and other people. It's why we have names. Do we all define ourselves as the same person, a gestalt entity? No. We describe ourselves by gender, by sexual preference, by race, by religion, by what we do for a living, by the country we come from. Why is it so awful to define ourselves by a difference in neurology? Because that's what it is at the end of the day. Seems like a bit of a double standard to me, but there we go. So, in closing then, who am I? I'm a man, I'm a son, I'm overweight, I'm British, I'm a redhead, I have a beard, I'm different and unique from everybody else in a million ways. Each of us is. Calling myself an Aspie simply points out another difference. Because it is a difference. It's, it's not one that you would use when you go up to somebody and say, "Oh, hello, I'm an Aspie," necessarily, although what would be wrong with that? But it's an acknowledgement of a difference that can be used by a person with a neurological difference should they feel the necessity to differentiate themselves or should they wish to. And that's all it is. The full word is Asperger's. Aspie, to me, is the shortened form of that. Now, I appreciate a lot of people think very, very differently. But speaking for myself, being told that I'm an Aspie, that I have autism, that I have Asperger's syndrome, it's a positive. Because I now know what that part of myself that I've wondered about all my life is. And the relief that brings me is immeasurable. Anyway, so that's enough rambling for now. I will leave a link down below to some information to two, I think, other videos that people might find interesting if they want to know more about it. And yeah, so please like, comment, subscribe, and as always, I shall speak to you soon. Bye.